Okay, we're back. Carl Severson here. How are you, Carl?
Good, brother. How are you?
I'm good, man. Thank you for coming on.
Good. Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
If you are over the age of 30 and listen to hardcore metal, Carl is probably partially responsible for most of the music you listened to as a child. So, founder of Ferret Music, released some of my favorite records of all time, and now running Good Fight Music, also another cool label, working with E1 Heavy too, constantly signing bands, putting stuff out, supporting the hardcore world. So thank you for coming on and talking for a little bit. I really do like getting some perspective from industry people. So I appreciate you being here.
Definitely, man. Happy to.
Yeah. So talk to me, because this is always fun. How did you get into deciding, hey, I'm gonna do a record label? You know, I know obviously if you don't know, Carl sang for a band called Nora, New Jersey staple in the late 90s, and then transitioned into releasing so many records, you know. So where did that happen in your career there?
So so I don't know, if you know, but I grew up with Mike Olander, who he sang for Endeavor, went on to sing for Burnt by the Sun. He's singing for the Love of right now. He and I went to high school together. Josh from Trusco and I went to high school together. So we got into punk and hardcore real early on. And I moved to Jersey, met those guys and started going to shows with them and all that. And eventually Mike and I ended up in, college together. And by then Endeavor had been playing a bunch of shows. And I was kind of like, I was the dude that's always with them carrying shit, but I couldn't be in the band because I was devoid of talent. And so came time to be like, hey, we should, put out a 7-inch. And I was like, oh, I'll do that. So that's kind of, that was kind of like, my way of contributing to Endeavor, who I had been running around with since high school and then into college. And I was like, all right, so I can do this part. And that later, that went well enough that, I did another 7-inch, and while we were out on the road, actually saw Converge play for the first time, and they just blew my mind. And asked those dudes, like, hey, would you guys want to do a 7-inch? And they said yes. And I just kind of, all of a sudden I had like 7 or 8 things under my belt, and it just was a cool hobby. And I was starting to get mail from people all over the world. And I brought records with me when I went on tour to Europe with Endeavor and in the US and things like that. So it just kind of grew from there.
Just true DIY label formation. That's fun. Yeah. So I've been able to work with you for years, recording, with my own bands and then working with bands that you've produced and stuff. And I appreciate that you've always allowed artists to take hard social stances and back it and stuff. And I can see you're still doing that now, like, promoting any artist that's becoming, active with the Black Lives Matter movement. You're pushing their stuff online, and you're helping in a time where a lot of industry people kind of clam up. It's nice to see a couple of labels take a stance and actually, move this conversation forward and use your platform.
Yeah. When this whole thing started, I like everybody else, I watched, the initial video, that happened of George Floyd's death. And then, even more so just watching all the protesting and what some of that protesting turned into. And we work with a couple bands in Minneapolis. So we've got some pretty close friends that, all that stuff was going down literally like, a block from where they lived. And pretty sure, a couple of those dudes were out in the thick of it, especially like the first couple of nights. And, so I looked at it a lot, and I was watching it, and it obviously was catching on and spreading like so much more than previous things that had happened. And, you and I reached out to a number of people for some perspective, just to kind of just talk about things. And, you were one of them. And, I admittedly, like 4 years ago or so, when, Black Lives Matter really started coming around, and you'd see, like LeBron and basketball players and things like that, sports that I followed were into it. I saw it, and I never thought anything, malicious against it, but I admittedly was like, no, all lives matter, like that. That's kind of where I was saying, it's like, no, of course your lives matter, but so does everybody. And then seeing how this whole thing progressed, and then where the protests were, and then, like watching this and talking to a couple of my friends about kind of, their experiences and seeing some of the things like that they posted online that were, pretty impactful. And then, I saw there was that one thing that like went around online a bunch, and it was a little girl holding a big sign. One of the things that, when I read it, just hit me. It was like, we never said all lives don't matter. We just need your help right now. And that was like, that really got me. I was like, okay, shit, that's 100% right. And the way I was thinking about it was, I wasn't getting their context, and I always try and tell my kid, and, like, you got to there's context for everything. You've got to understand the context, before you can just make judgments and stuff. And I realized that, I hadn't been understanding the context, and it just kind of hit me. And, and I talked to Rick from my office, and we were like, we got to do something, and we should, I want to be supporting our artists that are doing, even more than we are. And, but yeah, and here we are, and I feel like that's the whole point of this. At least the point, that I'm getting is it's time for people to really learn and get it. And people that never thought they were part of the problem. I mean, obviously, I grew up in punk and hardcore, and, I was at shows where dudes stomp Nazis and things like, that's the culture I grew up in. So I always figured like, I was pretty progressive and forward thinking with it. And, and realizing now that, yeah, there's definitely more to it than even, that I thought, and that I learned coming up in this culture and this music scene. And, and I'm learning that right now, and I'm learning it from people that have nothing to do with punk or hardcore, but, they're still able to, teach me something. And I figure, that's cool. I'm pushing 45, and I'm still in a spot where I can learn things. And, my kids are still young enough, they're impressionable, so I can teach them and, ideally get things, do our part to be better.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I appreciate you coming on here and maybe potentially admitting something that is a highly contended thing especially in a charity event for the Black Lives Matter movement, to say, hey, I used to not understand that. I used to, I was on an all lives matter tip for a minute, because it was, for me, I wanted to show, I know that it's a very polarizing time and people can be very unforgiving, but through rational communication and education, people can change their perspectives on things,
Right.
And the difference in semantics of words and how things get taken out of context can do a lot of damage. And, I asked a few people to come on here and answer some tough questions, and knew some other artists who had, past experiences that have changed and levels of comfort of what people would discuss. Some people are not on this for that reason, but, you were willing to do this. And I do appreciate it, because I think everybody right now, especially every white man who lives in a middle class, house in America, which is a large majority of the fan base in this community, should admit that they have a few things to learn and need to do some education and some soul searching, because, we all exist in this, bubble in our heads that we're this perfect person. We stand up for all these things. And yeah, so my opinion must be right, because I know I got into punk and this is what it's about. And then, you twist your own opinion and rationalize your own opinion, mentally, and project it out in the world, and you don't feel like it can be contested because you know who you are,
Right.
And
right.
I know you, I've known you forever, and I know that there's no possible way that you could be someone who could be considered a racist person. Ferret had worked with so many Black artists, and you've done so much on your own, on charitable work and stuff, where I'm like, admit that you just didn't get a context right, and now you understand it. And then, I'm just glad to hear that from people. And I think it's conversations that I've had with a lot of people, and a lot of white people in our community, where it's like, hey man, we should address this kind of stuff. We should talk about making mistakes and being able to educate ourselves and being able to kind of learn from the Black community now and listen to what they're saying,
Yeah, no, I'm absolutely. And, working in music, over the years, you work with, tons of people from, it's one of the awesome things about music. You would work with tons of people from tons of different nationalities all over. And, I've been lucky enough to travel to all sorts of, different countries and things. And, and it's, but I feel like it's important to fully get their perspective. And that it's weird because I was never anti it by any means. I was like, no, I see that and I get it, but I also like, what about these dudes? And now it's just a matter of having it framed the right way by people. Be like, no, dude, you're not getting what they're saying. And I was like, no, you're right, that wasn't. And I never thought it was bad. I was like, I didn't fully connect with it the way that I did now, where I'm seeing it. And I was like, where it's like really like, it dawned on me one day when early on in this and it just sunk in. And I was like, shit, that's what they've been saying, And,
yeah, I think
a lot of people, like maybe, don't necessarily want to say that they get that or want to, like people like to fit their own narrative, and you don't want to admit anything where you might not have been 100% right all the time. But, I mean, that's bullshit because, nobody just comes out perfect. You got to learn from your experiences. And sometimes, people learn from fucking really bad experiences, but good things can come out of them,
Yeah. I mean, a lot of that's happening right now too. And yeah, of course, I think, I mean, it's things we've talked about before, but I'm happy to see, I'm happy to see everybody coming around to that. And I think you should watch Matt's from Kubakan's conversation yesterday because, we talked about how he has a very peaceful approach to having discussions with people who are racist or disagree with what he's saying or are pro police or this. And there's two types of ways you can deal with people. There's the ones who will listen and the ones who won't listen, and a lot of what's happening right now is just having the right conversations with the people who will listen, the guy who, the guy with the KKK robe who's committed to his life of stupidity. Right. Yeah, you might not get through to that guy, but your buddy who you go over his house and for barbecues, who's like kind of an all lives matter guy, like maybe show him that video and maybe say like, listen, man, you're a reasonable guy. Like you're missing this, and it's like intelligent conversation and discussion with the people around you who may not, be correctly aligned with a movement that is literally founded on just treat us like you would treat yourself, racial equality and, this criminal justice reform. It's basic human rights. People aren't trying to destroy the world with the Black Lives Matter movement.
Everything that I've gone through and read, whether it's the ACLU or the NAACP, all their suggestions and stuff, you're just reading through it and you're just like, what's wrong with this? Like, where's the argument? Because all of it just seems completely, totally rational and fair,
Yeah. Well,
stop killing people for no reason.
Yeah. I do really appreciate you being able to talk about this openly because I know this was a bit of a challenge to admit, and I think you can't hold people to the calls for their past if they're not that person, if they're not the person that they are today. And I've known you for a long time and know that the work you've done is representative of the person you are. So I very much appreciate you coming on here.
No, definitely. I totally appreciate you having me on. I love what you're doing with this, and I'm definitely glad we've been able to help. I mean, the Ferret stuff that we pulled out is all like crazy old and super, super limited. So hopefully some people that are stoked on that, get to walk away with it.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. I've been doing this with a few people, so I want to speed round you. Okay. Just a little bit. I
had a brain injury, so I'm kind of slow.
That's right. I'm sorry, but okay. This is easy. Speed round. Favorite Ferret release of all time?
Torn Apart 7-inch.
Ooh, wow. A deep cut. Okay.
Yeah.
Favorite New Jersey hardcore band of all time? Endeavor. Very nice. So you're just going back. That's cool.
Well, I mean, Endeavor changed my life, and then Lifetime would probably be a close second.
Okay. If Nora was still actively touring today, what's your dream tour?
Dream tour. At the Gates when they're touring.
Okay.
Do something with them would be sick. And then playing with Judge, hands down my favorite band of all time.
Oh, there it is. All right, good answer. That'd be an odd tour, but
I think somebody get hurt. It'd be fun.
I'd go see At the Gates Nora and Judge for sure. And are we getting a new Nora record in 2021?
Probably not in 2021.
All right, you heard from the man. Stop bothering everybody. Cool. Let's talk about your giveaways because you really did come through. This might be one of my favorite giveaways in the pile. I need to get this out of the way. Sorry, Carl.
No worries.
A 68 Midnight 7-inch test press. That's got to be pretty rare.
Yeah, it's a 7-inch and the test press. So yeah, it's
Oh, you get both. Look at you.
I put them together for you.
Nice. Picture disc, first press, great artist. A first press of Long Live from the Chariot. That's very cool. Music for a Grateful Heart, a first press. A first press of 2 Disembodied records, which is wild. I got a few messages about those. So
yeah,
thank you for coming through with the old stuff. And ETID 3 LP box set, which is awesome. How many of those were made?
500 tops.
Awesome. Yeah, so that's a good collector's one for ETID fans.
Yeah.
Big Dirty first press, 2 different color variants. For the Love of 10-inch on red first press, which you'll be sending me if you have another copy of. Thank you. Poison Well Tropic Rot first press, Versions first press, and a Funeral for a Friend LP first press. I mean, this is awesome, man. You dug into. I saw some text pics of what you were going through there, and impressive array of vinyl. And then
it was a lot of fun digging through my basement archives. And, I was like, there's definitely some stuff down there. I was like, holy shit, I did not know I had this.
Yeah. And then on the E1 Heavy side, you guys came through too with a cool 10 LP bundle. So these are more current releases, but a couple High on Fire records, The Last Contortionist LP, Toxic Holocaust, Creeping Death, Kirk from Crowbar, another Crowbar record, a Fit record, and a Great American Ghost record. This is an awesome collection of vinyl. These are probably, I picked these. These are my favorite E1 releases.
Exactly.
But I would happily have all of these in my record collection. So yeah, man, thank you again, Carl. You dug deep for these giveaways, and I appreciate your honesty and being real on here because I think these types of conversations are really important right now. So thanks again, man. And we'll catch up soon.
So much for having me.
Absolutely, man. Carl Severson, everybody.
Be good.
Have a good one. Carl, coming through hard. Soundrink.live. If I was going to bid on one item, I would probably bid on this. We're taking $10 donations right now for our charitable auction. It automatically enters you into the giveaway raffle. Leave a comment for the item you want, and if we pick your name, you win that item. I will be back in 4 minutes with you, Ryan Hackney, to talk about maybe the coolest underground punk rock story I've ever heard. Everybody knows Death, right? You don't know Death. I'll be right back.